Inside this room, all of my dreams become realities, and some of my realities become dreams.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here? Alive! It's alive! It's alive!
You are listening to The Wilder Ride, getting wilder by the minute. Here are your hosts, Alan Sanders and Walt Murray.
Hey everyone, welcome back to The Wilder Ride, getting wilder by the minute, a podcast celebrating the films of Gene Wilder 1 minute at a time. And for season 2, we are diving into Blazing Saddles, and today we are looking at minute 17. 1. Fought Indians, fought drought, fought locusts, fought Dix. Remember Richard Dix, minute at a time. I'm Alan Sanders. I'm your host.
I'm Walt Murray, your co-host.
And joining us again in studios, it's their last bit with us during this run. We've got cowboy historian, trick gun artist, performer, actor, you name it, he does it. He's a Western guy through and through, Jim Dunham. Welcome back.
Good to see you today. It really is.
And great to have back via the phone line. We've got Dwayne Towns, a black cowboy reenactor who is a fantastic addition to the show as well, because he remembers laughing his butt off at Blazing Saddles the very first time he saw it with a mixed group. Dwayne, welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, well, let's get into this because we last left off yesterday with Gabby Johnson addressing the congregation, and we couldn't get through everything. He had finished with the line bushwhacking, but he ends today with some additional terminology that I'm going to have to rely on my co-hosts on and guests. He says, Hornswoggleer, cracker croaker is gonna roll away bushes cutter.
And no, stay away them bushwhacking, hornswoggling, cracker croaker is gonna roll away bushes cutter.
Now, I've done Shakespeare. I'm fairly certain I am not going to be able to fully break down what this actually means.
I think the Hornswoggleer was used by the three witches in Macbeth to stir up the when they were making that concoction, they were putting hornswogglers in there.
I think that was horned frogs. I don't think it was hornswogglers. What the hell is a hornswoggler?
Well, it's someone who gets the best of someone else through a hoax or by bamboozling them. So you use trickery and connivery to get what you want. So that's a hornswoggler.
Pretty weird. Yeah.
Does anybody have any idea where that term came from?
I have no idea.
Because you told us where bushwhacker came from.
Yeah,
that added some knowledge yesterday to the show.
Yeah.
Well, one of the definitions that I read said from an old Western verbiage. So it apparently came from the Old West somewhere. Who knows? But no, nobody seemed to really know what the etymology of it is, and I sure don't.
Huh. I was going to look up and see, but yeah, it's basically the same thing. It's an Old West term in which you've already given us the definition, to bamboozle or to hoax people.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't know.
All right, so no sidewinding, which we said was a liar, a cheat, somebody who won't go straight and narrow.
Right.
Bushwhacking, which is somebody who would kill you from behind the bushes. Hornswoggling, someone who will commit a hoax or to bamboozle. Cracker croaker.
Okay, right. So here's a tougher one. We're kind of going downhill from here.
We're running out of runway.
Nobody, including Urban Dictionary, seems to know what a cracker croaker is. Now, a croaker is a habitual grumbler. So someone who complains all the time, grumbles about everything, everything's always bad, everything's always terrible. You may know that person who just, no matter what you do, you could hand them a bag of gold coins and they're going to complain that the bag's not big enough or that, whatever.
Too heavy.
Too heavy. The bag's too heavy. Yeah. So constant grumbler. So I don't know what a cracker croaker is, but
yeah, I think the actors just made it up. That's my thinking.
I think so. It sounds great.
I mean, it works because at this point I haven't understood. Go ahead. I'm sorry, I stepped on top of you, Dwayne.
I think it's just a Hollywood makeup euphemism because I think they cursed each other just flat out. That was a movie euphemism to kind of bandy the ill will or the ill language that would be used at that time by some of these people in the movie just to let you know, hey, they're mad about something. So I don't think they actually did it,
Well, Dwayne, as somebody who has the movie basically memorized, do you ever throw these around at anybody who might be deserving of a good insult?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, here's why it works so well, is because it is such a foolish speech. It is so actually convoluted, for that the next speech is going to say what a great speech it is and how it articulates all of the things that the town wants to say. And you go like, are you dreaming? I mean, that's just the opposite of what it was. It was totally illiterate, totally a mishmash. And yet that's what he's going to say, is he's so glad that the children got to hear it, because that tells the story the way it needs to be told. And that's why it's so funny, because it totally does nothing of the kind.
Well, I was wondering if it was sort of like starting to pull in one phrase, the cracker, a white person who's kind of like trying to take charge or in charge in charge of either the flock, or in this case, back in the slave days, in charge of cracking the whip. So basically it's the white guys that are terrorizing the town. But cracker croaker, I have never heard those two words back to back. So I didn't know if there was some derivation about, somebody who used to be in charge of people but is dead.
I doubt it. I really doubt it.
You think it's a stretch?
I think it's too much of a stretch, yeah.
Yeah, that's no, Alan.
Stop talking.
Yeah.
You're an idiot.
Yeah, you're spending way too much time on this stuff.
Well, then he says, and this is where it's really hard to hear what he says, but I swear he says, and when he says, no hornswaggling cracker croaker is gonna roll away bushes cutter. So I get roll away as in to leave, take off, but roll away bushes cutter.
I have to say, between me and the internet, we're at a loss.
Yeah.
This didn't come up anywhere, and it wasn't for lack of looking.
Now, I want to know what might have come up if you were looking for bushes cutter.
But it so clearly says what needs to be said. That's the important.
Absolutely.
It does put a fine point on his whole argument, doesn't it?
It really does.
I was going to say, whomever you were saying it to, they know it wasn't a compliment.
Yeah, and absolutely right. Absolutely right. And this is, again, going back to what Jim was just saying, you could throw basically a completely meaningless term at somebody, and they're going to know it is not a compliment.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when this movie was made, Looney Tunes was already really, really big. Do you think that there's a bit of a patterning of Yosemite Sam, because he used to use a lot of like nonsense words when he was angry?
Dirty perky shark back flat and Morton Philip Martin Perkaluma Burton Waka Frack Slack back and floated back tar in that cataback.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it definitely resembles Yosemite Sam.
It certainly could, yeah, because it's really there's no question that it's Gabby Hayes.
Right.
He's trying to sound like Gabby Hayes, but Gabby Hayes probably was the character that Yosemite Sam is figured after. In other words, the cartoon of that character is also supposed to be a Gabby Hayes character.
Right.
Because he used to say stuff like that all the time, and you'd always just assume, well, that was his way of swearing, but you couldn't do that in a cartoon.
Yeah.
Right.
So every time Bugs Bunny or somebody would get the better of him, he'd be like, go, banga, danga, bang it! And he would just go stomping off.
Yeah.
And in fact, later, Gabby does a very similar sounding repertoire of words when he's on the rooftop trying to report to the town that the sheriff's coming.
Yes. Well, and you get the sense from Gabby Johnson that he's kind of the rough around the edges, gritty kind of guy. He does the hard labor around town. He does the work that nobody else wants to do.
I think he's the chorus. I think he's the moral fiber of the film.
He's the chorus. He's coming the Greek chorus.
He is like everybody else is wishy-washy. He's the moral, he's the moral fiber of this little town.
Well, Jim, when we do our conversations on air once a week about stories that won the West, we often talk about the original, the forgers and the mappers of the old of the country. These guys that were out in the woods, these pioneer fellows.
Yeah.
I mean, this is what I kind of imagine. I don't imagine them sounding this way, but sort of they know how to live off the land.
That's right. And look at, he's out there. He didn't get that feather. He didn't pick it up off the ground. He got to fight an Indian.
But I mean, let's analyze his dress for just a second. Would this be like something you would expect somebody that was maybe more living in the wild, maybe not necessarily living in a town, although he apparently attends church. But,
he goes to church. Yeah.
Look at how he's dressed. I mean, it's certainly tattered, and it feels like it's, I mean, he's wearing a shirt, but he also looks like it's got some kind of a pelt or something for a vest.
Yeah, he's supposed to be a mountain man lives in the wilderness. Yeah, he definitely is. Yeah.
Yep, rough and rugged.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that would kind of go with his character then. He's willing to stay and fight.
Right.
He's going to stand his ground.
Right. Yep.
He's the strength.
Well, and he even says in his speech here, I was born here, I was raised here, and I'm going to die here. That this is what he knows. He doesn't want to go anywhere else. This town is his home, period.
I'm glad you brought that up. Based on how he acts and talks, was he actually born, raised here? How long has Rock Ridge been on the map?
On the outskirts.
I mean, if I get the feeling the town's been around for a couple of years.
Yeah, a couple of years. Yeah.
Well, he's been born here. He's raised here.
Well, in the upcoming speech, not to skip ahead, but Olson Johnson says, our fathers came across the prairie to this town. So
right. Well, I get that they travel to make and settle, but I mean, honestly, how long has this town been up if he was born here? If Gabby Johnson was born here?
Well, he's obviously had a lot to drink over the years. He may only be like 23.
Well, I mean, he looks, 50?
Yeah, I mean, he looks...
I mean, well, Jim, you asked...
Well, but like let's look in history, Dodge City. Before Dodge City was built, it was Fort Dodge, and there was buffalo hunters that came there and used it as a headquarters area for buffalo hunting. Okay, so when he says he was born there, theoretically they could be saying that there was a little community or a little town, or that fur trappers or Indian traders or something might have been there. But one thing about this movie cannot be analyzed as making sense. So if you're gonna say, does that make sense that he was born there, raised there, and going to die there? Obviously, it doesn't make any sense at all, and it's not supposed to.
No, look, Jim, the mystique of a movie by minute is we've got to figure out something to talk about for...
Well, I will say this, though. There may not have been anything else there when he was born. This town may not have been around. He may have just been living in the wooded area in a tent or a cabin, and the town built up around him. I mean,
that could be. It could be he's just talking about just being in the local area, and the town has been growing since then.
Yeah, right. I think that's.
But he was raised.
I don't
there.
think he's a graduate of Rock Ridge University.
No.
But
I got to bring Dwayne in on this because I know it's hard for him to get a word in edgewise sometimes when we're all just yakking in studio. But when you start breaking a movie down like this, you start realizing sometimes the timelines may not add up to where the dialogue is taking us.
No, he's just trying to give validity to his character, who he is, because for him to jump up all of a sudden in front of all these people and demand that the preacher stop moving. He lets them know that he's qualified. He's been there longer than any of them. And he just, hey, I've been here longer than any of them. I know what's going on. And I'm going to say you leave if you want to. So he's just giving validity to his character. And then lead us on into the next scene where he's standing up on top of the building. And the sheriff is riding in. And they think he's saying the sheriff is near. So he's telling you his qualifications. So he's a model.
All right, well, we continue, and this is a fantastic monologue delivered by, for the character of Olson Johnson, but this actor is also a very well-known actor, and Walt, I know that's kind of like your role. You kind of always give us as we introduce new characters. Who is Olson Johnson?
Yeah, I kind of get down these rabbit holes with some of these actors, and David Huddleston's one of them. He was born September 17th, 1930 in Vinton, Virginia, and died August 2nd, 2016. So just a couple of years ago, 2.5 years ago from the time we're doing this. 85 years old. He had great longevity. But his first movie was in 1960. Actually, his first credit is a TV series, and that was a show called Shotgun Slade, where he played a character called Jinx. But he had 146 credits on IMDb. We had somebody last week who had 130 something, so I think he's got the most. But I'm just going to run through a list of stuff that's going to amaze you. I tried to cut it down as much as I can, but 1969, he was on Adam 12. He had several episodes of Bewitched. He was on Cannon. He was in a TV movie called Brian's Song. And if you've never seen that, it's a really moving movie about a Gale Sayers, who is
it's a tearjerker.
It is a tearjerker. The movie or the show Bonanza, he was on 2 episodes of The Waltons, 4 episodes of Gunsmoke, 2 episodes of The Rookie. He was in the TV show Kung Fu
with David Carradine.
Yes,
John Carradine. Who is it?
David Carradine.
David Carradine.
Yeah. He was on the show Emergency for a few episodes. One of my favorite shows of all time, The Rockford Files. He was on he played Sherm on an episode called The Resurrection of Angie. He was on Hawaii Five-0 and another alumni of Sanford and Son. He was on 2 episodes of that. He was in Charlie's Angels. Do you remember a movie called Capricorn 1?
Yeah.
It was about the faking of the moon landing. He was in that. He was in The World's Greatest Lover.
With Gene Wilder.
He played the bakery owner. He was in Magnum P.I.
A few episodes, not all.
A few episodes. Yeah, he wasn't a regular. So he had an amazing career.
You missed one of my all-time favorite Coen Brothers comedies of all time that he was in. And he played the Mr. Lebowski.
Oh, yeah, right.
He was in the movie The Big Lebowski.
Yeah, that's right.
He was the guy in the wheelchair that the Germans were trying to find and blackmail Mr. Lebowski, and they accidentally broke into the dude Lebowski's apartment instead of Mr. Lebowski.
Right.
And then at the end, when Jeff Bridges pulls him out and he goes, "You're faking!" Or no, not him. John Goodman. He's faking. If he's crippled, I'll be blah, blah, blah. And he pulls him up and he falls on the floor. He's like, I didn't see that coming.
Yeah. Well, as I was going through this list and I was trying to cut it down as much as I could, I knew that I would get through the list and somebody would say, "Oh, but you forgot that one," because this guy was in everything. Like
he's got a great look.
He does.
And if you need somebody like a banker or a lawyer or a politician, he's got a definite appeal for that kind of personality, for that look. And there are actors who work all the time because they fit that look. And he's got a good voice. I mean,
he's also big and imposing.
He comes across really well in those jobs. Yeah,
and his ability to deliver a monologue like this is
excellent.
Very impressive.
And it is, per the script, nearly verbatim. Every now and then there may be just a missed word here or there. But here's what he says, if you're not familiar with the film, if you didn't go back and watch this minute. He says,
"Now, who can argue with that? Reverend, I think we're all indebted to Gabby Johnson for clearly stating what needed to be said. I'm particularly glad that these lovely children were here today to hear that speech. Not only was it authentic frontier gibberish, it expressed a courage little seen in this day and age. What are we made of? Our fathers came across the prairie, fought Indians, fought drought, fought locusts, fought Dix. Remember when Richard Dix came in here and tried to take over this town? Well, we didn't give up then. And by gum, we're not going to give up now."
Yeah, it's excellent. It's good. He did a good job. That was a good scene.
I got to tell you, the first time I saw this, and Dwayne, I'll get you to respond first. When I first saw this, I was so taken off guard with saying "fought Dix," and I'm hearing this on TV. And then he immediately follows it with, "Remembered Richard Dix?" And it goes, "Oh, he's not talking about, using it in a bad way. He means someone's last name." What did you think during that speech here?
Well, the same thing you did. When he said it, I said, what? It catches your attention because his timing is so awesome. When he comes back in, you remember Richard Dix, that type of thing. It just made me laugh because his timing was excellent. His time was excellent.
The comic timing is definitely there, but we learned something, Walt, before we started rolling on this episode. that I had no clue that this may have been an inside joke for people who were fans of Westerns.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. Because obviously these guys know that Richard Dix was an important cowboy actor, and he stars in the Western that was the first Western ever to win the Academy Award for Best Picture of the Year, Cimarron, in 1931. And there's only been two more after that. I mean, the Dances with Wolves and Unforgiven. Those are the only three in all of filmdom that is won the Academy Award for Best Picture. And so yeah, it obviously to me is a joke for inside Westerner fans. Yeah.
That's amazing. I had never thought that this was, because we're going to get a reference to another cowboy actor later with Randolph Scott.
Randolph Scott.
Yeah. Well, it's the same thing. Yeah.
Which and that joke later, you get it makes more sense in the contextual clues. I'm like, oh, okay, you're referencing another cowboy hero. Mm-hmm. I didn't even think about Richard Dix in this case being an actual person that was an actor in a cowboy movie.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure it's deliberate.
I did not. Yeah. I did not either, Jim. Thanks for clearing that up because it was funny, but I did not know that. The Randolph Scott reference I got, I didn't know Richard Dix was.
Well, and Dwayne, I don't know if you're like me. This was one of those that I caught that joke, but I should have known that there was a deeper joke there, and I just didn't really think about it. Is that kind of how you were?
Definitely, 100%.
That's awesome. That's why we had to bring Jim in during these 4 minutes, because it really is going to give us a bedrock to go forward and fail from here.
That's right. That's right. It's all downhill, folks.
It's all downhill after this. Well, I love how and the minute does end with this speech, but I love how he addresses there's children in the congregation, and he's so appreciative of somebody who has taken the time to fully articulate exactly where they are in this predicament.
Right, and it obviously is funny because he didn't articulate anything.
Right.
Well, one of my favorite lines, and I'll use this from time to time, is I'm glad these kids were here to hear this authentic frontier gibberish. And if somebody ever is just kind of talking out of their left side, I'll say,
left side of what?
I'm really glad I was here to hear this authentic frontier gibberish.
It's a good line. Yeah,
it's a great line.
It is fantastic. This whole monologue, and this is one of those minutes where there's not a lot of action going on, but just to parse the words and the dialogue and to try to figure out, well, what the heck was Gabby Johnson saying? And now this politician who apparently, or I don't know if he's a politician, but he certainly is somebody who has any problem speaking in front of the crowd.
Right.
This is something, Walt, we're going to have to ask ourselves as we go forward, because we're going to be introduced tomorrow with more people from the congregation speaking up. There's never anybody identified as the mayor or the commissioner or town spokesman. I mean, it's like they're all almost like a commune. Nobody ever is like identified as the leader.
Yeah.
Well,
because we think it's the reverend at first. He's addressing the congregation, but then Gabby steps up. Well, okay, maybe now Olson steps up. So at some point, we'll have to keep track who actually is in charge in this town.
Well, you must not have been paying attention, because the mayor is Mr. Johnson, Mayor Johnson. The town council
Johnson?
is made up of Councilman Johnson, and Councilman Johnson.
I forgot.
And Reverend
and the
Johnson.
twins Johnson and Johnson.
Johnson. And then Howard Johnson leads the Rotary Club.
Yeah.
That does make it easier when everybody's got the same last name. Yeah. See, now you look brilliant.
Well, I have my moments.
Okay, you polish that diamond, it actually does shine.
Yeah, I don't think that's what you were polishing, but
oh my God.
Thanks. I'll take that.
Well, and this is one of those minutes that goes by a little bit faster, and that's okay. They don't all have to be drug out or anything. But before we start to wind this down, Dwayne, one of the reasons we brought you on is, I wanted to have as many different ages and ethnicities and backgrounds and people who have seen this movie that may have been the same age we were when we saw the movie, or at least can appreciate what's happening in the movie. So, Dwayne, I want to head to you first and foremost and just let you close out your last time with us here on this season 2 about your thoughts in general about Blazing Saddles and more about where you think it fits in your library of, let's say, movies you like to watch.
And also, I think we want him to express how he got interested.
I was going to get into that.
Blacks in film. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, there were never any Hollywood renditions of any black cowboys in movies. I think this was a very bold move on the by the hand of Mr. Mel Brooks to do that. It was funny. It added the correct history. Being among Caucasians and their reaction was funny. Him with Madeline Kahn and the way she treated him and fell in love with him. All of that stuff was good. Him and Gene Wilder, the drunk gunfighter that had been shot in the butt by the little kid. It incorporated all the things that the Hollywood genre does not incorporate. True stories of the American West.
Excellent. And now I want you to take a minute and remind everybody, I know we said it when you first came on last week, but there was a specific cowboy who did films, especially singing cowboy films, that was sort of a hero of yours, and you actually had a chance to meet him.
Yeah, I learned about it. His name was Herbert Jeffries. He was a jazz singer. He sung with Earl Father Hines. He sung with Duke Ellington as well. His main hit in the jazz musical scene was a song called Flamingo. He was also the star of the first black Western movies. Herb Jeffries was his name. Bronze Buckaroo was his most popular movie he's known for. But he made 4 movies, 2 Gunmen from Harlem Rise to Range, and the Bronze Buckaroo. And I have a webpage that talks about Herb, and the webpage URL, you can get there and take a look at it. It's ironhorseman.tripod.com/Bronze Buckaroo. You can learn all about Herb. I met him in 1996 at the Gene Autry Western Heritage Museum. You'll see at the bottom of the page a picture of Herb and I. And I'd also have a Facebook page you can look at that is facebook.com/Dwayne Towns. And you'll see more about me, the horses I train, the horses I own, and you'll learn more about me there.
Excellent. Jim, and you also had a chance to meet Herb Jeffries.
Yeah, I did. I'm a member of the Single Action Shooting Society, and our biggest shooting competition is called End of Trail, which we, at that time, were shooting just outside of Riverside, California. A lot of the Hollywood movie people would come visit, and Herb was a fan, and this group decided, our organization decided we wanted to give him a special honor, special award for making those black westerns. And so we took a sculpture, and it was a beautiful bronze sculpture, and we referred to it as the Bronze Buckaroo Award, and we gave him that honor and gave him that award. And I got a chance to actually hand him the award back in, and I can't remember what year it was, because it might have been around 92 as well.
Early 90s.
Yeah. When did Herb die?
Herb died in 2014.
Okay, so he was around. I know that toward the end, he basically was restricted to just being in a wheelchair as well, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. But he could still sing.
Yeah,
he could still just right, and
A lot of people know Gene Autry,
That's right.
but they don't know Herb Jeffries. Or at least I say a lot of people. More people probably know.
Well, they do, yeah.
Yeah, you're right. A lot of people don't know. I didn't know, and I've been a cowboy since I was 10. And when I saw he has a beautiful voice, but before he passed away in 1995, he cut a CD called Herb Jeffries, The Bronze Buckaroo Rise Again. Cut it with several entertainers of recent genre. And if you really want to hear him sing, I would pull that up. But he did sing in those movies.
Flamingo, like a flame in the sky, flying over the island to my lover nearby.
I think you'll enjoy the music.
Excellent. Jim, I know you were telling us during one of the between days here that we were recording, you would really encourage people if they're fans of Westerns to look up some of the work of Herb Jeffries.
It really is worth looking, because you can find his Westerns, or at least a couple of them. You can find them online by searching through whatever Google or whatever it is to get to them. What happened is that there's no question that movies in general, and especially Westerns, were literally dominated by one group of people, and that was Caucasians. I mean, even the Indians were played by Italians rather than using real Indians. Although Jay Silverhill, who played Tonto, actually had classes in Hollywood for Indians that came off the reservation, wanted to get into movies and play Indians, and he taught them film etiquette in order to go read for a movie. But Italians played the Indians, and they just basically wrote the black people out of the stories. There was very few that actually had somebody that actually played that part. And so a few of the films that John Ford did started to do that, and he did the one film which featured the black buffalo soldier that he did, and that was one of the few times that Westerns actually had a black star. And I think what happened was Herb Jeffries said there's all these communities because at the time he was making them there was so much segregation. There wasn't true integration in our country. There was so much segregation that there were small communities with little movie houses that never got a chance to see anybody that looked like them on screen. And he said, there's a market for that. There's a market. Just like today, there's a tremendous market for Spanish films. I mean, the market in the world for Spanish-speaking films is enormous because there's great entire countries that have Spanish as their main language. And so what happened was Herb Jeffries saw that there was a market for films that could be in these movie houses that would appeal to young people in a black community, so that the African-American communities would have somebody they could look at and say, that person looks like me, and he's a hero, he's a good guy, and he's winning against the evil outlaws. And of course, in all of his movies, everybody was an African American. So and I think that was smart on his behalf that he didn't try to stir up a racial problem. He didn't have Caucasians play the bad guys. Right. He was smart enough that,
at the time, anyway.
But what it did is it meant that the young people in the communities that watched his films could relate to the people in the films, and that was such a wonderful thing to be able to do. He deserves a lot of credit, and he's been given recently a lot of credit for that.
Well, I know for me, even being a kind of a history nut, I was kind of shocked a couple days ago when y'all said that 1/4 of the Cowboys were African American. That is a shocking number just because of what Hollywood has given us over the years and shown us that all the Cowboys were white. So I would also assume that there were probably black sheriffs and.
Oh yeah. Bass Reeves, one of the great U.S. Marshals, was a black man. Yeah.
He's a bad. Yeah. He's a badass too.
There are, by the way, some excellent books. Katz has written a book called The Black Cowboys, and there are now, because of the interest in historical contributions, both for the Buffalo Soldiers, which was the 9th and 10th Cavalry, which are made up of African-American soldiers, as well as the Cowboys. There's a lot of very good books out on the Black Cowboy. A little bit of research or Amazon or whatever. If you're interested in reading about this, there's some wonderful books available.
Right. I'm glad you brought up Bass Reeves, too, because I know there was one day I was filling in a different radio station, and they were talking about a town in Wyoming or a university in Wyoming or someplace that they wanted to change their mascot because their mascot's the cowboy. And they're like, well, that's male, and that's only male, and it's only white male. And I was on the air, and I was like, well, then apparently you don't know your Western history because the term cowboy has nothing to do with being a white male.
No, it's true.
It was a job.
A cowboy was a boy, and they were 13 to 14 years old, and the cowboys are very dirty. They make it very glamorous on the films, but these are young boys, and they rode not tall horses or horses that were basically Welsh ponies. 12, 13, 14 hands, we could easily get up and down on because they didn't work for much. and the ranchers let them work. So that's what a cowboy was.
Mm-hmm. The guys that came up the Texas trails called themselves drovers because they drove cattle. That was the term that they used and that they preferred was drover.
Drover. Excellent. Wasn't at one point in time the term cowboy was actually kind of synonymous with almost being a bad guy or with a gang?
It was during the time of, like, for example, the Earps in Tombstone. The cowboys was a loose term for ruffian and hoodlum and outlaw. It may exist. Many people think the origin of the term goes back to the Revolutionary War. And during the days of the Revolutionary War, there were young men whose job was to take care of the animals on the farm. In other words, take care of the cows. Mm-hmm. And then they would grab the squirrel rifle off the mantelpiece and hide in the trees and shoot at the soldiers. And because they didn't have a uniform and because they hadn't joined the military, they were looked upon as ruffians and troublemakers and hoodlums. And the Army called those men, or young people, they called them cowboys. And the term actually was used during the Revolutionary War to refer to those characters who did that. Old term.
So it was basically a derogatory term, wasn't it, Jim?
Yes, it was. It was meant to be derogatory.
That's why I love doing this.
Yeah, me too.
I'm just sitting here like I feel like Sean German was joining us. I totally lost track of my own show.
Yeah, well, this is really fascinating to me, and I think to a lot of people too who just aren't really aware of that portion of history and think we do understand it because of what we've seen in the movies.
Well, I'm going to go back to what I said way back with our inaugural episode. I think it was our 0 episode. What I loved about this movie as a kid growing up, because I also grew up with not seeing diversity in cowboy movies or westerns, as I saw a black sheriff who was the hero, and he had a white gunslinger as his partner, and they were paired up. And I always wanted to be the Waco Kid.
Yeah.
But my black friends wanted to be Sheriff Bart. And so we played, quote, cowboys and Indians growing up, but we were Bart and the Waco Kid.
Yeah,
and we would have these adventures as buddies. And I love that this movie, underneath it all, was teaching people, who cares about your color? It's about which side of the law you're on.
Yes,
that's right.
Yes. Exactly. And that's the benefit that's the message underneath the humor. Yeah.
All right, so we kind of are wrapping this up. Dwayne, I know you already told us how to find you on Facebook. Jim, one more time, I know your big plug is for the Booth Western Art Museum, but take a second, let people know you've been on a lot of things like the history of the gun on the History Channel.
Yeah, I did 4 episodes of the history of the gun for the History Channel. I did a PBS special called American Experience. I did all the gun handling in a film HBO Western called Blind Justice, and did a Quantum Leap episode with called The Last Gunfight. So yeah, I've had a chance to do that, and then most recently, of course, I'm the historian at the Booth Western Art Museum here in Cartersville.
Folks, if you get a chance to swing by here and meet Jim in person, first time I ever met him was doing theatrical stuff, and then he brought his guns to an after-show party and showed us all of his trick gun moves and all of his spins and twists and turns and everything you see Michael Biehn do in the movie Tombstone, and it is phenomenal. And you still do a Tombstone reenactment once a year.
We still do, in the
gunfight.
the 4th weekend in October at the Booth Museum. We have what we call a Festival of the American West. One of the things we do is a reenactment of the gunfight. The gunfight lasted 30 seconds. I figured out how to make it last a half an hour.
Hey, perfect for a minute-by-minute
That's
podcast.
Right. Absolutely. And we run it in slow motion. We talk about what led to the fight, and then we do it in slow motion with no ammunition of any kind, and then we do it with blank ammunition at real time, and explain to people what happened in the aftermath. So it's really quite an educational experience to come see it. 4th weekend of October here in Cartersville at the Booth Museum.
All right.
Hey, Jim, may I say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
If you've never seen Jim do his act, I was privileged to have him come to a banquet at our Cowboy Miners Shooting Association that I had for the first championship in 2000. It's phenomenal. He spins his guns in all kinds of directions, shows you what Hollywood does, makes it very humorous. If you hadn't seen it, and if you're still doing it, you need to get out and see it.
Awesome. All right, Walt, where can people find out more about us?
Well, one thing we would appreciate is if you are on iTunes or whatever platform you're listening on, if you could just take a second to give us a quick review. If you like what you're seeing or hearing, we'd love for you to give us a 5-star rating. That will definitely help push us up the boards a little bit. And if you will take a second just to make a quick comment, let us know what you think of the show. That would be huge, because then when people come on, search for Gene Wilder or anything like that, it'll push us up towards the top. So we would really appreciate you taking a second to do that. And again, join our listeners group, facebook.com/The Wilder Ride. Hit the button, join the listeners group, and join in the conversation there.
And come back tomorrow, Wednesday, Hump Day. We're going to continue in the church. We're going to kind of find out what Olson Johnson continues with, Not Giving Up Now. And we are going to end this minute tomorrow with Let Us Pray for the Deliverance of Our New Sheriff. But to find out what happens in between, you got to come back tomorrow for this, The Wilder Ride.
Wait, is Anal Johnson going to make an appearance tomorrow?
We haven't seen him in church. I don't think he's the kind of guy that goes to church.
He doesn't seem like a church guy to me.
Not at all. So, yeah, I guess he's back spitting in his. Everybody else is spitting in the spittoon. He's spitting in the glass.
Well, he may not be invited back after that spitting in the communion cup incident.
All right, I turned our mics off for a second to get your whole thought out, because guess what just came rolling through downtown? So we got to hold for just a second to wrap up this minute.